see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
You remember that? I remember your metaphors. That's the stuff that I tend to remember from the interviews.
Anyway.
Okay. Well, let me just give a quick intro. And it's, hi, it's Edwin Rutsch, and this is Dialogues on How to Build a Culture of Empathy. And I'm here with Andrea Cohen, and we're going to be talking about just some ideas about how we can build a culture of empathy. We've already done an interview already, right? And what we want to do is I have a list of kind of bullet points that I've kind of been gathering about how we can go about building a culture of empathy. And we just wanted to kind of talk about those and go down the list and kind of brainstorm and just kick ideas around. And you'd already had some ideas. I had, how do we build a culture of empathy? And you say, how do we be a culture of empathy?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. And I think there's a real distinction, because building means it's something that we're working toward in the future on some level. And I'm talking about in every moment, in every interaction, particularly the challenging ones. How can we be empathic? How can we be compassionate? How can we listen through to what somebody cares about at the deepest level? Listen through our judgments, our triggers. Stay present with an open heart and do a little exploration of what matters to this other person from a place of the heart, and keeping our hearts open. I use the word heart a lot because I think we're such a heady culture, and we want to do the action from up here, and we cut out the rest of our body. And what I strongly believe is that we have to integrate the rest of our body in order to be empathic.
Yeah, so it's kind of like the building is kind of like an action component. And before we can do kind of action, we have to have some kind of a connection with people, in a sense.
Yeah, well, the being is the action.
Mm-hmm.
That is enough. From my perspective, that's what helps transform energy. That's what makes people feel this other person really cares. It's just how we are.
Yeah. So now if I follow your ideas and your advice, I have to redesign my whole website. I have to go from a culture of empathy to a culture of being empathy.
Well, I like it. It's not actually redesigning. It's just adding a huge component. So it's not throwing out the other, but it's really providing a solid foundation upon which to build that.
Well, I know what you're talking about. It's that, a lot of people, when I'll put up like a post, I just put a post on the Empathy Center site, and it was a quote by Karl Rove, about empathy, kind of that empathy is just a code word and all this kind of stuff for liberal activism.
Right.
And so I posted that, and all these people are, oh, that's so terrible. He's a jerk. He's this. And then I say, no, you have to be able to empathize with him. Like, where is he coming from? What are the deeper feelings and needs and desires and values that he has? So that's the being of empathy, right? We have to, because we don't get to a culture of empathy by, violence, by, judging people, by demeaning people.
That's right.
And people think that those things is what gets you. We're going to intimidate the living daylights out of you, and then you're going to be empathic. You're going to, and it doesn't really work. I think that's kind of what you're addressing. It's like the means of empathy are the ends of empathy.
Right. And I think the point that you made about we can't demonize half the world and claim that we're the ones who are empathic, because in that process of separating and demonizing the other, we're losing the capacity to see ourselves in the other, see the goodness in the other in each of us. So we're engaging in separation, who's better, who's worse. It becomes black and white and either or. And that's not the way for us to thrive as a culture. That's a way for us to continue the polarity that is getting worse and worse. So, and it's very tempting, to go into a place of judgment, into a place of criticism, into a place of comparing, they're not as good as we are, whatever, and that is the wrong road.
Yeah.
It's the only road is, who is that person? Let me understand that person. Let me walk in that person's shoes. What is that person's experience? And do that from a place of not looking to find the fatal flaw, but really looking to understand.
Yeah, well, I've been organizing around the building a culture of empathy in the sense that to transform society so that the social structures and what have you actually nurture empathy. For example, the justice system is basically structured in a competitive form, right? It's like you go into the justice system and you're put into this social structure that
Right.
pits.
That's right.
You've got your gladiators who are there, who are your lawyers, and they're going to battle it out. And
That's
somehow
right.
truth, it's like the old gladiatorial system, that the
That's right.
truth will emerge out of this gladiatorial battle. And so I guess I kind of see as well is the restructuring, the building for me is the being, like you're saying, as well as, taking that action to transform the social structures in society so that they at least lean towards fostering empathy.
Right, right. Interestingly, you mentioned the criminal justice system, and I know you've interviewed Dominic Barter in the past, but I'm doing some work at the Women's Correctional Center in Washington, and we've been teaching them some practices of compassionate listening and restorative circles so that they can integrate a more meaningful system to transform conflict within the institution, where they're actually learning to listen beneath the words of attack and the words of dismissiveness and meanness, but to listen beneath that for what was somebody intending at the time, and to learn the honest expression, well, this is how it landed for me. And the women, so I'm talking about this because one of the things you were wondering is, okay, so how do we bring greater empathy? What are the doing pieces? So for me, one of the doing pieces is going to a place where people are very marginalized, like the prison system, and being a compassionate listener and teaching some of the skills of compassionate listening that I believe are foundational to any non-polarizing criminal justice system, where people are battling, just like you were talking about. So we're working with the women to call restorative circles, to call a circle when there's a conflict, and to learn to listen to each other, to reflect, and to listen with the heart, and to try and suspend judgment and just cleanly reflect back what they're hearing. And we're just in the starting process of doing this. Actually, I've been going in for about a year now, about once a month. And the women, just a couple of weeks ago when we had our closing circle after a whole day of teaching and having the women practice facilitating their own circles, just hearing how meaningful these practices are to them in bringing greater peace into their culture. It's a culture that a lot of them are stuck in for perhaps the rest of their lives. And they're already talking about, I can see how this would be useful with my family, for example. And so there are the ripple effects. And I think the more that we, as compassionate people, as empathic people, being these practices, the more we can bring that into places where people don't know about this stuff. They've not really heard of empathy. They haven't heard really about compassion. I think the greater the impact on those places where people are suffering, which is actually every place.
Yeah, it's like we're in one big prison here on planet Earth, prison Earth, right? Kind of
Right,
in
right.
a sense, we're
I think it's true.
uh,
We feel victimized by
uh,
structures that don't represent us, perhaps, or feel victimized by our background, and and we don't know how to get beyond that.
yeah. Well, that's what this is. This is actually a page on the website on how to build a culture of empathy, and I'm just kind of creating bullet points of. I actually would like to write a piece on, like a blueprint for building a culture of empathy. And this is
Hmm.
kind of where I'm just starting to jot down notes and so forth. So, in a sense, it's like we've got planet Earth here, prison Earth. We're all kind of stuck here. For we have a life sentence, right, on planet Earth,
That's right.
and we're kind of having all these kind of different conflicts. And it's like for me, it's like to build a culture of empathy is to have a vision of it is kind of like the first thing. I mean, we talked earlier, and you had sort of a vision of empathy as being the strings, two strings that are kind of in tune with each other.
Right.
And it's kind of like, how do we create a vision that it's like, Martin Luther King, he got up there and, at the the marches and, in front of the Capitol, and, he says, I have a dream. And he kind of laid
Right.
out this vision that people can say,
Yeah.
oh, that's kind of where we're going. We're on this road, we want to go somewhere, and this is a picture of where we're going. This is where we're at. And kind of like,
Right.
how do we get from here to there? And even what is that there? What is that vision? And I find that the compassion and empathy communities and so forth, there's a lot of focusing on the immediate, on, peace, on the prisons, or doing workshops, or changing the schools. But there's not a large vision for a whole cultural shift
Uh-huh.
so much. So I'm kind of like looking is how do we kind of create this vision of what the
Yeah.
world looks like if, empathy becomes like the primary, global value within our society.
So as you were talking about that, Edwin, I was thinking of, speaking of a vision, and I'm a very visual person, and so I had this image of every human being on this earth linking arms in a huge global circle. And here we are, a circle of all humanity that can hold whatever happens. We are here for one another. And we can bring the dirtiest thing in the sense of, those people who are violent, who are, emotionally disturbed, whatever. And we can hold it. We hold it. So anyway,
Yeah, that's your
at
vision.
first,
It's like, I mean, were you imagining as some kind of like a as some kind of a day of, everybody, across the country, across the world creates this human chain,
this
between
human chain, it's
across
not the, yeah.
every continent, from Africa, one end of Africa to the other, one end of Europe and Asia to the other, you know.
It's interesting. Another vision came to me, which is even starts more locally, that wherever there is a place of conflict or a place of violence, for example, there was a spate of killings in Seattle at a coffee shop. And so I could imagine that each person who was in the vicinity, finding another person in that vicinity to link an arm with, and then the next person added. So wherever conflict arises, wherever pain arises, start right there. And then, I don't know. I just have,
Yeah, I can feel that. That feels really warm and
fuzzy.
yeah, it's more than that. It's almost like it's like showing, that we're connected. It's like
That's
saying,
right.
here's this violence that's happened. And it's like, when violence happens, people start to fragment and become separate and
Right.
fearful
Fearful.
entities.
Right.
And then you're saying that instead of that happening, immediately come together and you kind of show, hey, we're really connected. And this is,
Right.
it's like a tangible symbol. There's something about a vision too that it's like it's nice to have those symbols that kind of
Right.
show it, it's
Right.
kind of physically and symbolically. And there's actually more than symbols because when we connect physically with people, our oxytocin level goes up, right? And our
That's
stress
right.
level goes
That's right.
down.
That's right. It's touch. It's often without words. And in fact, the silence of it is a beautiful concept to me. It's just one touching the other, touching the other, touching the other. And I think words, I'm tired of words, actually. I think they often get in the way of that deeper feeling, or they may get in the way, but there's something beautiful. It crosses cultures, to not have words in this sense. It's beyond any, we're let's say in Seattle where I live, we speak 52 different languages, whatever. And so there's a lot of diversity. We don't all understand each other. And this goes beyond the limitations of culture, of language, and it's just about the human touch.
Yeah, everybody can link arms,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
touch each other,
yeah,
to kind of represent that. Yeah,
right. It's an interesting thing.
yeah.
So,
Well, I just interviewed Paul Zak, who wrote the book, The Moral Molecule. So it's all about oxytocin and all the things that raise the oxytocin level within
uh-huh,
your body, which is actually the more oxytocin you have, the more calm and relaxed. And
right.
it's like an
It's an
to
anti-stress thing.
anti-stress,
Yeah.
anti-cortisol, it's
Yeah. And
counteract.
the more of that you have, the more you can come from the best that lives within you at the core of your being. That caring place, that empathic place, it just exudes from your being. I think the more of a place of true ground you are, then the more loving you are, naturally, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the calmer we are, then we can kind of come from that place and maybe not have the fear. Well, that's the overall. That's kind of the first point was just creating a vision. Was what I've been just thinking about. And I asked people about that, like, what's your vision? What does it look like? And I think yours was a vision of an orchestra, right? It's that
uh-huh,
everybody's kind of playing in tune and in harmony or what have you. And the opposite was the scratching on a
uh-huh,
chalkboard was the opposite, which is kind of like
right.
the world we have now in a lot of ways.
Yes, scratching at each other's chalkboards.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's a visceral feel. I can feel that.
yeah,
I can
yeah,
hear
yeah.
that. So the second point was setting an intention. Like, it's like it seems like to create a culture of empathy that we have to kind of have the intention of why are we going to go even have that as like a vision. What is it that creates that intention? At least that's the part that I was looking at.
Uh-huh.
It's like and for me the one reason is for the intention is it feels so good, when you're in harmony.
Right.
I mean, it feels good. So I think that's one of the main intentions. So we can't kind of like force people and say you will be empathic because that's just kind of a top down approach.
Right. I think really at the core of our being is a really longing to be a beautiful person. I think that everybody at some level shares that, but we lose our way, and we lose our way particularly in challenging situations. Um, so I don't know where I was going with
No,
that.
I
I was
think
going
I mean,
somewhere.
there are studies, they show that children will automatically give assistance if
Yeah,
at a
yeah,
young age, like,
yeah,
2 years old, you drop something, And
Right.
then they go and they see that you're in need, that you're trying to reach it. I mean, nobody's taught them to do this, and
Right.
they want to contribute to your well-being, and
Right.
they'll run over and grab it and give it to you. So the intention is really the intention is to create a culture of empathy is already like biologically wired in our biological. It's like we're like, why do we need an intention to breathe, right?
Right.
It's like we
Right.
don't need an intention to breathe. We have it already wired into our body, you know.
But
And
what gets in the way is really the question, is that what happens when we're growing up that gets in the way of our being able to act on that? And I think there's a lot of messages that we receive as kids, as adults. The world's not safe. You have to take care of yourself, that kind of thing. And it all kind of
dampens
it
maybe
dampens.
that impulse.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And that's just so sad. It's a sad thing. Um, and I think the antidote to that is it's almost like going to the gym, the empathy gym, the compassion gym, and it's just exercising those muscles repeatedly of being in challenging situations, keeping our hearts open, being curious about what's at the core of another person's position that we might disagree with, but who is that person? What's happened in their lives to bring them to this place? And where might there be a piece of commonality that can help melt the barriers between us?
Yeah. Well, that's the, I kind of look at that and I see there's like, how do you kind of get that, tap into that? You can do workshops. You've been doing workshops. You've got the book, the compassionate
Right.
listening. You've been doing compassionate listening. But those tend to be like workshops or kind of, people go to them. I just went to a really wonderful one with Susan Partnow here
Oh, you went
and
to that.
yeah,
Great.
and put up some video photos of it, and and so it's this 1 day event, and it seems like we really need that on a weekly basis. So I'm thinking of starting the Church of Empathy, so that we have like you need that constant integration on a
Right.
minimal weekly basis, because I'm just not seeing this. One time you go take like, Stanford, the Center for Compassion Altruism Research, they've got an 8-week training, but even that, at the end of 8 weeks, it's over. And this is such an important value. It seems that we
Right.
need like an ongoing kind of a structure, and I'm not quite sure how to kind of do that. And I'm kind of thinking, maybe like a church of empathy, where you go and all the activities. There's no theology. It's just the hands-on, oxytocin raising exercises and rituals or whatever, and the empathic listening, the compassionate listening, that you
Right.
kind of get your empathy battery charged on a regular basis.
How about this, Edwin? How about a webinar, an ongoing webinar, almost like a huge, we always tell people start a practice group, meet regularly, do these practices, have people bring real life situations that they can use the practices we teach of compassionate listening, for example, and work them through by exercising these core practices that we're teaching. But I know people are using webinars now. And what do you think about the idea of having, monthly compassion webinars where people have some basic skills and then are broken down into small groups using a webinar?
Yeah,
That's
I
a
see.
real doing thing.
Yeah, it's really getting people together. That a lot of times people are isolated
Right.
with an interest in this, and there's no one within the immediate community that they can kind of get together and be nurtured. And this is a webinar is kind of like an intermediary. There it's like it's one thing, one step along that continuum
Right.
of depth of connection. So yeah, I've been I've been talking with Mary Jane, who has helped put together the
Susan's workshop.
Susan's
Yeah,
workshop, and
yeah,
so she's trying to get something together in person, and
yeah,
it's kind of like a struggle. People are just busy and they don't want to,
right.
and so I've talked to her about a webinar too. That I would support that if we could get some kind of webinar up there or small group discussions, like on Skype, or Google Hangouts, where you can
Right.
kind of do something on a periodic basis.
I would love to find somebody who has the technical capacity to work with us to do a webinar so that it's just a medium that is really available big time now. But I'm not a technician. I don't have that technical capacity. But we constantly hear from people who say, it's exactly what you were talking about. I'm isolated. I don't have people to practice with. And it takes a lot of courage to bring it into your daily life with no obvious support other than your desire. So I think the time is right. The technology, I believe, is there. So maybe with more of us really opening to that as a possibility, someone will come forth and say, yes, I know how to do that technologically, and I want to work with you to do that.
Well, when you're saying webinar, like these group Skype and Google Hangouts up to 10 people, that's pretty simple right now. So that can be done in in a small group in that way. I'm doing the panel discussions, so we're doing
Uh-huh.
that, which is kind of somewhat similar, and then the interviews. So there's a whole spectrum of
Yeah,
kind of events that can kind of be done, and doing them online. So
right.
I'm here to support that, and try to experiment. And I just applied for a grant. I don't know if you saw those
I did.
posts.
I
Yeah.
did.
So the idea there is to, kind of create ever more narrowly focused, exploration topics on empathy and compassion, as well as to actually do empathy circles. And then I can imagine actually doing some mediation type circles too, bring some conservatives, bring some progressives together in a circle process on, Skype and so just kind of use this medium as much as possible.
So people can listen to each other?
Yeah,
Is that your thinking?
yeah. So it'd be more of a dialogue between the two in a kind of a circle process.
Uh-huh. I love the idea of a circle process of bringing diverse voices to bear and something that won't devolve into debate. And
Yeah,
so that's where it would take skill and, kind of a common intention. Or, if people don't have a common intention, at least enough skilled people holding the space to be able to bring it back into that heart opening rather than heart closing environment.
yeah. I was at a conference, Compassionate conference in San Mateo a couple of years ago, and there was actually an attempt at this, in person. And Susan Partnow was kind of the facilitator,
Uh,
and she started off, really well, I felt, in
yeah,
terms of saying, well, what are your values?
right,
She
right,
started
right,
off with people's values. And then the conservatives tended to say, and the libertarians, freedom, liberty.
right,
And then I think there was some progressive, and it was service. And then so she was starting to get, take it from, the kind of the policies, philosophy down to the values.
right.
And then the somehow it devolved. It kind of lost that. That's where
Yeah,
the facilitation. It's really hard to keep it from going back into that
right.
what people are familiar with, the arguing of their
That's right.
philosophy and perspectives and policies and strategies, and to really get people to share, the deeper values. That's what's your value. A second question I find really helpful there is, how did that value become important to you? What's the
Yeah,
story of how that value
exactly.
became important
Exactly.
to you?
Yeah.
And then maybe some of that reflective listening, so that the other side is actually reflecting,
Right.
kind of like the Dominic Barter, the
Yeah.
restorative circle process, the restorative
Yeah.
empathy. So I think that process, I haven't seen it done really well, with progressives and conservatives. I mean, you're doing that all the time with compassionate listening, bringing Israelis and Palestinians together, and Germans and
And Jews and
Jews and so
whoever.
forth. Yeah.
Yeah. It's harder to manage in a big group like that.
Hmm.
Um, so my preference is always to do a little modeling in a big group and then break it down so that people can actually feel each other. I don't mean literally touch each other, but feel their hearts
Yeah.
by being face to face, heart to heart. In a big group, it's just, I think, much more challenging. So,
Yeah. So small group discussions, like just a handful of people in a group, or
well, you're probably aware of the World Cafe model.
yeah. I love
So
that.
I did a project a number of months ago bringing people in the diverse elements of the Russian community together in the Seattle area, people who never come into the same room together. And the way we devised it was to have them break into small tables of 4 to 6 people and have them go around with a talking object. I think that's how we did it. And carefully craft the questions so that people opened up a bit about what they cared about. And it was amazing, the environment that was created in that moment was an amazing one. Um, However, has there been follow through? It's what you were talking about
Yeah.
before, that you can feel it in the moment. It's so powerful in the moment. And then what? Then
Mm-hmm.
what happens? And that's where coming together, when everybody's so busy, where does the motivation come from to pursue and deepen?
Yeah, it's so easy to say, well, I just won't go today. There's the weekly meeting or whatever. I
Right,
don't. It's
right.
I
I'm
got
too
to
busy.
get out of the house. I'm tired.
Right.
Yeah. So it's got to be a pretty deep, you know, energy there to kind of get you up and going. And
And it is so much easier when you can do it from home. When you can do it from home, what we were talking about earlier, using Skype or Hangout, and again, I'm not very technically proficient, but let me just, it's actually Susan on the other line.
we could have gotten a group call here. So
Yeah, right. Um, okay, she'll leave a message.
yeah.
Um, but I think that's where if this kind of technology becomes more mainstream, that's a real concrete follow-up where people don't have to leave their homes, don't have to leave their offices, and can actually have that very compelling kind of connection very easily.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I'm all for it because this is I've done over 120 of these interviews and panel discussions now. Using Skype, and
yeah,
so I love it. It's just so effective, and it can. Uh, but there is something. What do you think about the Church of Empathy idea, in the sense of that it's really about doing all the activities geared towards fostering like a culture of empathy, in the sense that I kind of see it as an evangelical empathy. That it's not that you come and you say, oh, I'm going to be. And I see that a lot of in the human potential movement. You go take a workshop, you go this, and you feel good, But there's
yeah,
an evangelical thing part to it, that we really have to transform society. And you got to have your own empathy battery, filled. It's like
yeah,
you got to be heard, you got to be seen, you got to be felt.
right.
And there's also the physical part of it, like it's the physical hugs, it's the doing some acting activities, like I do this freestyle dance, and sometimes the introduction is somebody does a movement, right? And you introduce yourself and say, "Hi, I'm Edwin." Edwin, you know,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
everybody mirrors it, you know.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
and there's really something about the, you know, being in a physical location, and I think also we need more kind of community support in the sense that people feel so isolated. Um, you know, they feel isolated. Nobody cares about me. I got to take care of myself. You know, the government, you know, no social services are cut back. You know, you're struggling financially. That there's got to be some kind of a, you know, community support kind of modeling you know, the compassion or empathy. You know,
Yeah.
so
You know, I think it's a good idea, but then people have to go. They have to get out of the house and go
uh-huh.
there. It's so I really don't know if it would be any more successful than I don't know. I don't. It's
Yeah.
an interesting concept. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's worth a
Uh-huh.
try.
Yeah. Okay. I'm playing with it. I'm kind of kicking it
Yeah.
around. The ideas, you know, it's just and creating, you know, experimenting with really activities that are really geared towards giving you that warm, you know, feeling of
Right.
connection and the
Right.
oxytocin. Like I do that dance, and I also do contact improv dance. And when I come back, you know, I just feel like, oh man, I just feel so good. You know, it's like my whole body is tingly, and you know,
Uh,
I have a sense of spaciousness, and you know, so somehow to, you know, capture that, but you know, around this empathy, you know. So well, that's the intention part. um, then the other kind of, I'm just going to go down the list here of just some
yeah.
ideas. And when I start asking people about how do we build a culture of empathy, someone from the peace community said, just create a dialogue about it.
Ah.
You know, get people talking about it, create a national dialogue, just get people, you know,
Hmm.
kicking the ideas around, thinking about it. And that's kind of become the operating principle behind these dialogues, is just I'm getting people to talk about it, you
Yeah.
know, and then
Yeah.
get more people to talk about it, and people see other people talking about it and say, well, I'll talk about it too. And you keep, so that's kind of one strategy is
So, are you reaching beyond the choir?
I'm really looking for the choir. I don't even know who the choir is at this point, you
They're
know.
at the church.
The church doesn't even exist is the problem. See,
I
that's what I'm
know.
saying. I'm trying to even create. I'm even trying to find who the. I would be happy to just be able to speak to the choir because I don't know who they are, you know. But I'm not the type of person who just, you know, sits and speaks to the, you know, the choir means it's just people who kind of believe in this
Yes.
already, who
Yes.
value it, and you kind of, you know, create your little in group, right?
Right. Right.
And I've been to the Tea Party rallies, you know, gone to talk to them. I've been to the Occupy, you know, talked with them. Been to the, you know, when they had the state convention here for the Republican Party, when it was here in the Bay Area. I went to them and interviewed them.
Okay.
Been to the Democrats. So that's the least of my worries. It's I'm even looking for the choir, you know. It's like if you're in the choir out there, come on down. You know, I want to meet you, you know?
What was your experience when you reached out to Tea Party, Republican? You know, was it similar to, reaching out to people like us and
Yeah, it was the one thing that stuck with me is when I went to the Tea Party, it was people were saying, nobody's listening to us, nobody's listening
yeah,
to us. And then I
yeah,
went
yeah.
to the, you know, Occupy, and it was like, nobody's listening to us, nobody's listening to us.
It's the
So
same
everybody,
thing.
it's the exact mirror. They're
Yeah,
almost like
yeah,
mirror. The reason we're out
yeah,
here is because nobody's listening, and we want to be heard. We're going
yeah,
to scream and yell and
yeah,
call you, you know, names to
yeah,
get your
yeah,
attention, you know.
yeah.
And when I went to the Republican convention, it was actually very enlightening because I had one of my kind of breakthroughs in terms of kind of insights in terms of how to create a dialogue there. So so I find it very good, and I'm ready to go do to bring different parties together and kind of do a facilitated kind of dialogue. So, but I want to get kind of a base set because I feel like there's the choir's not singing in harmony yet.
It's a discordant choir.
It's
Let's listen better so we can attune to each other. I like that. Oh, well, Edwin, I mean, I think you're doing an amazing. You're persistent, and I think I'm deeply grateful for that. Actually, I think it's a dialogue that needs to happen. People need to be focusing on what you're focusing on. So
yeah, I think you're speaking to that persistence, and that's something I see as I'm going to add that to the bullet points here. Persistence that I'm seeing. There's this kind of in and out kind of experience. It's like people will try something, and it's like if
right,
it doesn't immediately have this huge payoff, they kind of go off and try something else, and they go
yeah,
try something. And I'm seeing this, and it's it's like that's one thing I do see in myself is focused and persistence, and
right,
this is in it for the long term. It's a lifelong endeavor,
right,
and it becomes you kind of set empathy as a core value, and you work the rest of your life at
for it, yeah.
nurturing and deepening it, and learning about it and what have you.
And that vision, this is where I think vision is important because it pulls you through those shadows of hopelessness, that and cynicism that are so pervasive right now. People are feeling beaten down, I think, by speaking up but not being listened to, and trying it again and not being listened to. And so I think that is where vision is really important. You have to be able to see the light.
Yeah. Yeah, and that
So,
that beaten down quality, I see that as well. I mean, you're kind of seeing that in your community or in communities in general. That people are just, it's kind of like hopeless. It's never going to happen. It's so overwhelming.
right,
This is just not going to work.
right.
Well, I'll keep plodding along, but I really don't care. I just want to go have some fun. Or,
Well, and I feel it sometimes within myself, and the way I transform that in myself is by looking at the relationships closest to me, so that when a conflict shows up, it's almost like, thank goodness, here I can practice again. I can calm my triggers. I can go into my heart. I can choose to stay in connection. Thank you, you
Hmm.
know. And so, I'm not as global a thinker on some level. I start more easily with me and the people closest to me. Um, but I very much appreciate the global vision. I love the global vision, but my work is a closer to home work. So, and I guess it's what I just said. Is on that score, I think I owe a debt of gratitude to people who challenge me because they force me to deepen my capacity for self compassion, empathy for others, and to remember the practices that I teach and to remember to use them with the people in my daily life. That's why I wrote the book,
Hmm.
because we talk about it out there. We have the vision out there, but what do we do? In our partnerships with our children, with our parents, with our siblings, with our the people in our workplace. What do we do? And that's where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, and what keeps you going then? What's keeping you going in that
Was that a
direction?
question for me?
Yeah, I'm just kind of wondering. I'm just wondering what's kind of keeping you going. It sounds like you kind of just relating, focusing on the people around you and then doing conflict resolution there. And I'm imagining you get some kind of a nurturance from that, transforming
It's
those.
about me. It's
Uh-huh.
about deepening my growth. It's about my growth and my being able to show up in these challenging situations from the place of empathy, compassion, heart. Um, and in order to do that, I have to suspend my judgment. I have to calm myself down and center myself. And so I deepen those practices, and that's where I get fed. It's from my own growth, and my own challenging myself. And there's always something to learn because I mess up a lot. And so, okay, this is where my work is.
Well, in
So,
terms of that vision and the specifics, I kind of see it like Google Earth. Do you ever
uh-huh.
use where you
Yeah,
see
yeah,
the
yeah.
whole
That's right.
globe, right?
That's
But
yeah.
it's kind of nice to kind of step back and see the whole Google Earth, but then to be able to zoom down to the specific instance of what's going
Right,
on. So to have
right.
the that at least that's like a little metaphor
It's
for
a
me.
dance.
Yeah.
It's the dance. And we open, we close, we go out, we go in. And if we get stuck in any one place, then we're not doing anybody a whole lot of good, I think. Or we're not being totally human. To be human is to have the long vision, the short vision, it's not to be always stuck in one place, but to be able to transition with grace. So that's the dance of life.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. I love dancing. So it's a good
Of course you
metaphor.
do. Because you do it.
Okay, so that was the see. The one thing was the dialogue. So that was one thing I'm kind of looking at is generating this dialogue, and
Yeah.
also then it's to create a network. Network and connect with others who value empathy, and it's the loneliness. So the importance of being in the network and with others. So that's maybe where the Church of Empathy will come in, or or the weekly or monthly, web type stuff. You got to
Webinar,
have that connection,
Web
otherwise.
Connect. I love the idea of a Web Connect where somebody in need of revisiting the skills who has something that they really want to deal with, to have a place to call in once a week and divvy up into small groups of 4 or 5, 6, and do some of the exercises that you did at the compassionate listening workshop that you took a couple of weeks ago. But being able to really reflect back, what are the values, and take turns giving that gift to each other. And when people come together who are interested, a community develops very quickly. And but so I just love that idea of some kind of a every 2 weeks or once a week or once a month, people can dial in for empathy, and then be divided off into groups of 4, groups of 6, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's that. Well, for technically, for Skype, Google Hangouts is I think 9 or 10 technical
Uh-huh.
limit. So it's a bit hard to do a whole. It sounds like you're saying a webinar with like 30, 40 people, and then it kind of breaks down into groups. So
Yeah,
technically, I'm not sure how to do that. But if people kind of call in into small groups, I think that's quite easy.
right.
Kind of
Well,
like
and that's probably a doable place to start. I was talking to a friend who was just on a webinar. She said there were about 14 or 15,000 people worldwide on it,
uh-huh.
and that they were able to break into smaller groups. I don't know how it happens technically,
Mm.
but certainly, something like Hangout or Skype is a place to start for those people who technically know how to do it.
Yeah. Well, how would like an hour or hour and a half session like that go? What would be the flow of it?
It could be as we do a training. I mean, I don't know, but it could be with a given set of skills um, in the beginning and a modeling, so a full group modeling, and then have people break down into the smaller groups for practice and somehow technically be able to pair people up or put them into small groups for practice so that there would be a skills building component in the beginning. This is just one way I'm thinking about it. But then the rest of the time is for practice and then coming back together at the end. You know, what was this like? How did it work technically? How did it work in every other way? What questions arose? And it would be, and that those components could be moderated. And it could be something that could integrate things like compassionate listening, restorative circles, NVC, you know, anybody who has something to offer. Once the technology is in place, you could really bring in people with a different set of with different sets of skills if the technology were in place and if it was experiential.
Yeah.
I think the key here is making it experiential.
Well, here's something I've been, I started a project, the free empathy curriculum project,
Mm-hmm.
and it was kind of hard to kind of had people say they wanted to get involved, and then I
Right.
found that it really need to put it together, that it really needed really experienced people who already know it kind of inside and out. And so I kind of put that on hold and kind of went doing this conference, which is
Yeah.
really working out really great. I'm really thrilled about it and these interviews. And so I would like to do like an online curriculum. So I'm kind of imagining what you're saying is that a lot of these steps could already be laid out in, like you're saying, having it modeled, right? So get
Right.
really good models, best practices models, and then a short clip, of maybe 10-minute clip of it being modeled, maybe several, so you can go through, and then you can kind of create an online curriculum and kind of work your way through it. And then there can be parts where you can actually connect with a group of people to do the in-person
Right.
part. So,
You know, I think about when Susan and I co-facilitate our workshops, and I'm sure she did it similarly with the workshop you went to. We will model an exercise together so that people get the sense of what they're going to be asked to do. I could see that being videotaped,
yeah.
and and then and then having people break down into their own groups to do it. But, to do a presentation of what the skill set is, a modeling of how it looks when you're practicing it with a personal example, and then have people break down into sessions. So
Yeah, well,
it's,
I'd love to work on that with you all if you're interested, because I've been talking with there's different curriculum out there. Like interviewed the director of the education program at the Center for Compassion Altruism Research at Stanford. So they
uh-huh,
have a 9-week training. You have quite an extensive training, and there's a lot of a variety of trainings out there. It's kind of like putting them into some kind of a framework that there
yeah,
could be like branches and links to the different trainers, in some way,
right,
have pictures of everybody. And
right.
so it kind of becomes like a gateway to, it's already, whatever can be put online can be put online, and then it kind of spread to, to tapping into these other trainers and something like that. So,
Yeah, I think it's an intriguing idea, actually. Um, what it would take would be for each group that has something to offer to locally produce something that could then be put online. But it could be a very short segment.
yeah, and the segments could actually be done online in a group model, for example. Like if you and Susan and Leah or whatever could actually model some, and it could just be recorded, on Skype, and it's just captured and it's just put online. So you don't have to actually
That's
be
true.
there in person. There's a woman who does empathic listening process. and she has a curriculum. So we're actually doing that. She's going to be giving a talk on Skype,
Uh-huh.
Google Hangouts actually. Then we're going to be recording it, and we're going to be putting that online.
Huh.
And there's also a woman, Lisbeth Brudal. She's in Norway, and she has like a 20-hour and a 40-hour empathic listening training.
Yeah.
And so I'm working with her. I interviewed her twice, and then two of her trainers were interviewed. So we're kind of like sort of already starting a page, starting to break down her process. So it will be
Hmm.
online too. So I can imagine some kind of a consortium of different trainers, from these
Right.
different traditions, putting together some kind of a curriculum like that. So.
How could you do that? I mean, technically, let's say if Susan were here with me, how could you actually, what would you do? Just a wide shot of both of us?
You're actually both at home at your own respective computers and homes.
And then you could record that?
Yeah, you're all four, four people, maybe five people are in the Skype window, and then you're all. We did that one call, I think. I don't know if you were in that first call that we did, kind of a. Yeah, I think you were that test call with Leia way
Right.
back when.
But I was just thinking about what you were talking about is that there could be various teaching components online, and somebody could click on one and they could see. I'm just, I'm thinking about when we role model exercises, and we're in this, usually we do that when we're in the same room.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're saying is we could do that. I could be here, Susan could be in her house, we could role model it, but then how would you capture that and put it someplace?
Just like I'm doing now, I'm capturing this, and I'll place it on YouTube. And then once it's in YouTube, then we have a web page, with it's kind of like taking your book, putting the book, on a web page
Uh-huh.
or a series of web pages, and then inserting videos that demonstrate each of the sections,
Okay.
kind of
Well,
events.
that's something that I think we should explore
Yeah.
further. I'll talk to Susan about that as well.
Okay, that'd be great. Uh-huh.
So, yeah, why not?
Yeah, it's like make it more accessible. I think in the long term, some people are kind of concerned, like I'm putting my curriculum out there, and but I think in the long term, it's going to, get more people involved, and it will actually be, for people who are trainers and stuff, will actually, I think it would support what they're doing. It would give a
Right.
wider audience and create more, training opportunities in the end.
And it serves the planet.
Yeah, I mean that's the main thing. I mean
That's the vision.
yeah. So
So,
well, okay. Well, we've been going for about an hour. I don't want to keep you too long because I think we only went through a couple of points. Got a whole bunch more. So. But this is really helpful for me. It's just having this outline, just starting to go through it,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm just kind of be going one pass after another pass after another pass
Right, right.
to keep kind of developing this blueprint for a culture of empathy is what I'm
Yeah.
calling it. So, but what would be the next step then with that curriculum? Just want to get.
I think it would be having, let's say if it were Susan and me, because we do a lot of facilitating together, is deciding on an exercise that we wanted to roll, do a modeling of, with a little explanation up front, a modeling of. So explanation, modeling, and then maybe a suggestion of how people, of one thing that listeners might do to practice this in their daily life. Something like it's just similar to the way I've organized the book,
Mm-hmm.
but actually add the visual component
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and the audio component to it.
Okay, well, I'm ready to talk about that anytime, and just we can even just do some tests and see how it works.
Yeah,
Just kind of
I think
try
that
it
would be
out,
fun to
put a
do.
little web page, add a few,
Yeah,
you know, insert a few videos, see what it looks like, try it out, experiment. Because I think it's really the next cutting edge of of this is getting it online, because people are really hungry for step-by-step how to do things.
I know. I'll talk to Susan about it as well, because I think that it's a really good next step to get people to live it a little bit.
Yeah. And actually, like the workshops, like Susan did want to come down here to do another workshop, is that, it could be videotaped as well, and then broken into components and then put online as well, in addition to, doing it some on Skype too.
Right, right. So I know that this won't be in the recording, but was she thinking of coming and teaching another workshop that would then be videotaped?
No, I was just suggesting that. She wanted to come down to teach some more.
Uh-huh.
But we can talk about, there's all kinds of, it's once we have the intention, just kind of start on it, then
right.
The thing kind of reveals itself how to do it.
Right.
That's what I find.
Right. Because I am coming to the Bay Area in September, and if there's any, and I will be in the East Bay, so if anything comes to mind.
Like doing a workshop, would you have time to do a workshop, or?
It would be a one-day workshop or a couple of hour workshop. I could probably work that in. This is a big vacation. We're taking a 3-week car trip. So let me think about that.
Okay, yeah, okay.
So I don't know if there would be, if you would even have the capacity to pull together enough people to do a workshop. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Do you think you would?
We could talk about it, like how many you would need, the details. Like there was I think 25 in Susan's
I know, it's
workshop.
a big crowd. I know, which is great. But anyway, let me talk to Susan about this other idea, because that would be in some ways an easier thing to do. Mm-hmm. I will return her call now.
Okay, great. Well, it was great talking to you. And,
look forward to our next with you, and thank you again for doing this.
Thank you too. You've been at it for a long time, so kind of inspirations over there at the Compassionate Listening Center, folks. So
we love what we do.
Okay.
Okay. Take care.
Then. Bye.
Bye.
See the world through other people's eyes. Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.